Hi, welcome to the channel. If you're like most people, including all of our mainstream scientists, you're probably confused by experiments like the double-slit experiment. How does gravity work? How can light propagate through empty space? Why is there no gravity in quantum field theory? Right? Quantum mechanics doesn't have gravity, and yet it works, right? Almost like gravity's not needed at the small scales. And yet at the large scales, you don't need quantum mechanics, right? Because gravity seems to work just fine, although there are a lot of issues. And when you try to find the answers to these questions, it all gets super complicated, and it's something you couldn't possibly understand. The point is, nobody can understand this stuff. It is so complicated. The only people that can are the people that basically invented the math, right? But math is a model of reality. It doesn't dictate reality. If you look in the past, behind me, this is the geocentric model of the universe, right? It was made up of many planes of existence, all not interacting with each other. And this is how you were able to account for the motion of the heavens. But the issue was with the planets, right? The planets would retrograde because we were obviously not in this cycle, right? Not a problem for the current model at that time, right? What did they do? They just created epicycles, which is basically add a circle. All you have to do is add another little plane, right? That doesn't interact with that one. The planet was now in its own plane of existence, and that plane of existence did something different. It would actually move differently. This is called an epicycle. And the only way you could understand this system was to have a knowledge, in-depth knowledge of the complicated math, right? And anyone that said, no, that's not the case, because such as Galileo, they were ostracized, made fun of. Galileo was locked up. It's always the case, and this is still the case in today's world. It's still the case. You're still ostracized for outside ideas that challenge the mainstream viewpoint. But what did it come down to? It was a perspective change, a paradigm shift in how we actually looked at the data. Could we come up with an alternate model, different way to think about it? So your average person couldn't deal with the painful 7 realms of heaven, the complicated math of epicycles, Fourier transforms, etc. But if you have the actual knowledge of the underlying reality, now it's much simpler. We went to a heliocentric model of the universe. Now you don't need epicycles. Why? Because you have a better understanding of the reality. Instead of making reality match your math, now you just changed the math. Why? Because you have a better understanding of the underlying reality. And I think the same thing is going on today, why we haven't had any true breakthroughs in physics since the 30s. The mainstream will not accept alternate views. They won't even look at it. And why? Because they accept completely contradictory, Hippocratic thoughts. They hold opposing views. This is the same people who will accept witness testimony in a court of law, right, and put someone to death based on witness testimony. But now if there's witness testimony that there are aliens here, or that they've been in contact with non-human intelligence, these are the same people, mainstream science, that will not accept any sort of hypothesis even that aliens could possibly be on Earth, or that the phenomenon even exists, despite all that we don't know. So that's why I'm so interested in this, is that I think we need a paradigm shift. And where is a paradigm shift going to come from? Where do revolutions normally come from in scientific thought? Do they come from the mainstream? We've had no change again since the 30s. We still don't believe aliens are here. We still don't believe they exist despite overwhelming evidence, witness testimony. And you can say there's no hard evidence, but chances are the government is taking the hard evidence, or whoever wants to keep this secret, which is probably also the non-human intelligences. In the same vein, we haven't discovered anything new about consciousness. We still don't even have a model of it. Ancient thoughts like astrology, life after death. You had a psychic program in the CIA. The CIA and the US Army literally have, or had at least, probably still have, a remote viewing program. Despite all these things, we still haven't made any breakthroughs at all. And I think it stems back to our base assumptions. So today, I'm going to challenge most likely your base assumption about light, the nature of matter. And I'll do it through 3 parts. The first Hippocratic contradictory belief that our mainstream physicists and mainstream scientists actually hold and think there's nothing wrong with it is they accept that there is a dual nature to light, right? They accept that light can be at the same time a wave and at the same time a particle, right? They just accept this. Why? Because it makes the math work. It gives them an answer, just like your epicycles did in the past. So we'll look at this. And if you stay to the end, may even explain the double-slit experiment. The second base assumption that I'm going to challenge, and again, this video will be for open-minded people, is that light speed is not constant. It may be constant in a vacuum, but Einstein said himself, light speed is not constant in a changing gravitational field, or as we'll see clearly, when it goes through a medium. This is why we have refraction. Light speed changes speed. Our modern physics calls it the effective speed of light, right? The effective speed of light through a medium. But light changes speed through a medium. And I'll show you by experiment how that works. And then I'll show you just by observation how we can totally change our minds there and disregard it. And again, accept opposing views. You can't have opposing views. Is light constant, or does light change speed to medium? You can't have both. And finally, the third base assumption that I'm going to challenge today is most likely your assumption that space is empty, that it's nothing, right? That there's nothing in space, despite the idea that light travels through it. Obviously, that would mean that the ether is real, meaning that light actually just propagates through a field as a wave, and that is the ether. And this has been an old idea that is actually coming back lately. I saw Eric Weinstein said on, I believe, the Joe Rogan podcast that, oh, the ether may be real. And the point of this is if you remove these blocking contradictory assumptions, so if you can just suspend those base assumptions for a little bit, you may see that it's quite clear. Actually, you don't need super complicated math. There aren't principles that are impossible for you to understand because you just can't possibly understand all the math and their arguments. Once you remove base assumptions and get to the actual reality, now you can have alternate views that make sense, that make much more sense. And finally, for the guaranteed comments I'm going to get to stay in my lane and not look into these topics, I'd like to say, where do you think this information comes from? Where do revolutionary topics actually come from? They come from the mad scientist in their basement, yes? Well, I actually have a degree in material science from U.S. Air Force Academy, one of the top schools in the nation. Material science is physics and chemistry, so that does kind of apply. And I was admitted to a Portuguese mental hospital, and I'm in my basement. So I pretty much fit the exact bill of a mad scientist in their basement. So where do you think new information comes from? It comes from people like me. So thank you for being here. If you're still here, I think you're in for an exciting ride. Chris Lado, welcome to Lado Files. Okay, what you see behind me there is a Ferrocell. It's essentially LED lights around the outside, and inside you have a very thin film in between two plates of glass of ferrofluid, which is tiny nano particles of metal, so magnetic particles. And what he has in here is a magnet. This is from Theoria Apophysis, Ken Wheeler, 9 years ago. And it shows here your actual magnetic field lines, how a magnet is going to bend light essentially through the ferromaterials, but it gives you essentially a 3D image. So an amazing device, a recent invention from what I can understand. He'll make the argument here is that everything in the universe is electric. And this is what I've been a proponent of for the past year at least, is that the universe is electric. And I can't believe I hadn't heard of the electric universe theory, actually. It is an alternate view of how the universe works. Everything is electric. The electromagnetic field works down at very super microscopic scales. I believe that inside of an atom, which is light, which is an electromagnetic wave, and goes all the way up to large scale gravity. And that is what Ken Wheeler argues here, that the universe actually is electric, and you can see it through this device, at least some example of it. So I'll let this part play. I couldn't say it any better than Ken does. Check it out.
The light is actually hitting it and bending it along the lines of centrifugal divergence. The centripetal convergence, where light is literally going like water down a drain, is where you see these black voids in between the white lines. Okay? As you can see, these lines that are moving seemingly clockwise are closest to you. They're brighter. The darker lines is the other side of the magnet. Well, they seem to be moving counterclockwise. No, they're moving in the exact same direction, only inverse to your spatial perspective.
Okay, so what that means is you're actually looking into a 3D structure. They're moving in the same direction, right? Above, think of a spiral descending down into the magnet and then going on the other side and coming out the other side in the same direction again. If I have an object and I'm rotating it this direction, right? But now if I look from the other direction, now it will appear to go the opposite, right? So clockwise, I believe, whatever you're seeing. But if you're looking from the other direction, it will appear counterclockwise.
Space has no attributes. Space is nothing. Space is the air inside this donut. The cream filling inside the donut of magnetic divergence is literally the farts, the after effect, the remnant remains of the loss of inertia, which necessitates magnetic divergence and reciprocation. As Faraday called magnetism, he called it the dielectric field. And oddly enough, one of the first experts in electrical engineering was the guy who got closest, even closer than Tesla, to understanding what magnetism was in its relationship to dielectricity, because only dielectricity exists. Only. Magnetism is the loss of that inertia. Electricity is a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. That which we call gravity does not exist. Gravity is nothing other than incoherent dielectric acceleration. What you call magnetic attraction and that which is gravity are the exact same damn thing, 100% sure as shit, right as rain, irrefutable, undeniable. Magnetic attraction and gravity are one and the same thing. The only thing that distinguishes them is coherency. In a magnet, we have coherency. In gravity, we have total incoherency. Enough quantity affects quality. Enough quantity affects quality. There's only one field, and there are three field modalities. Electricity and magnetism, and that which we call gravity, they're all the same thing. There is no need for a grand unified field theory. They've always been unified. The only thing that's not unified is human comprehension of the nature of these field modalities in relationship to one another. And they are all one and the same thing. To think of grand unified field theory is as stupid as a moron, a caveman, a troglodyte trying to unify water, steam, and ice. We would roll our eyes. Where I'm trying to unify water, steam, and ice. Really? They're all one and the same thing. Well, I haven't unified. Well, they're already unified.
Yeah, that's just an amazing point, and comes back to what I mentioned in the intro is if quantum mechanics works so well without gravity, and gravity, or at least general relativity, the math, works so well without quantum mechanics, then they don't really need each other, right? It seems like they're already unified. Like Ken Wheeler says here, what's missing is the unification in our brains, in our small, tiny human brains. And I think this is going to change very soon with artificial intelligence. This is going to unify our current physics. And what does that mean by unifying? Is going to get a different perspective, which I believe is already out there, already exists.
It's that simple. Actually, I should have said sat simplex. It's not simple because human comprehension makes it difficult to explain, making it therefore not simple. But the principle itself, as it stands by itself, all alone, with nobody else trying to figure it out with their caveman brains, it is not simplex. And it's only not simplex because human beings are very stupid. It's not that that it is that difficult to comprehend. It is that we are that stupid. Oh, we've got computers, iMacs, and iPhones. We're so smart. Really? Do you think so? There's one irreducible fact. It's irrefutable. Every branch of science throughout history has always thought that they were right. They always thought they were so advanced. And 100 years later, sometimes 200, we look back on those people and go, oh my God, they were so stupid. Timeless, irrefutable, undeniable. That always happens. It always will happen. It's as true now as it ever was. It's as true in the future as it ever will be. Thanks for watching.
Okay, I love that part. And it's so true, right? And that's exactly what's been going on for the past 8 decades at least, both with the phenomenon and with the basic understanding of cosmology, the universe, and physics. I think it's about to drastically change with artificial intelligence. And I'm certainly ready for it. It is very, very frustrating. Like you said there, it's much more simple than they make it out to be, right? They'll try and complicate you with math. They complicate the solution with math because you can pretty much do anything you want with math, right? Make it complicated enough. Invent new imaginary numbers. Invent a new system that can make your argument correct. And it's very difficult for other people to understand your manifolds and your Hilbert spaces and all these ridiculous concepts. But at the core, reality is usually much simpler. It's much larger. It's amazingly giant, amazingly small. The numbers are just preposterous, but the underlying principles can be understood. Let's look at the current ridiculousness. Quantum field theory. Watch this. This is so awesome. And I do want to highlight these people are all very intelligent. They're very smart. The problem is there's no self-introspection. They can't imagine that they could possibly be wrong, that their base assumptions could be wrong, that the entire system could be essentially lying to them. And this is why they can't change their view. This has always been the case. So I mentioned at the beginning the epicycles, right? The planes of the universe. That's how they were actually able to explain retrograde motion for hundreds of years, right? They were able to explain it. You just had to learn the complicated math, but it would work. So now if we look at the current standard model and we look at quantum field theory, this is how it actually works, okay? You actually have the same thing as the planes of the heavens, right? This is the neutrino field. Neutrino field, despite there being a dual nature to light, right? A dual nature to light, that light can act as both a particle and a wave. When you look at actual quantum field theory, they've never been able to find an actual particle. They can't find the particles. So what do they use? Quantum field theory is exactly what it sounds like, fields. This was the Higgs field. The Higgs boson was in the Higgs field, right? Which is separated from the neutrino field. And there's an electron field, right? And these don't interact unless there's some miraculous, invisible, virtual particle, etc., that actually acts in between them as a boson. You have the quark field. And the bosons is this other epicycle, if you will, another circle of a Fourier transform that allowed the electron to actually interact with down to the Higgs field. It's exactly like the epicycles of the past. There's no difference. It's exactly the same. And yet they can't see it. They literally can't see it because they're so wrapped up in the math. They have their heads so far up the math that they can't even see that they've lost touch with the reality. And instead they call people like me or people like Houghton Arp, astronomer in the 80s. People like Eric Lerner, the Thunderbolts Project, who proposes electric universe. These people are the crackpots. We're the crackpots, right, for promoting an alternate theory, and yet the theory that they're promoting and calling everyone else stupid and not worth the time to even look at, right, to spend billions of your dollars. Billions of dollars have been spent on this, looking for things like dark matter, dark energy, looking for the boson, right, the particle that they're going to find, which is going to prove their standard model. Literally, billions of taxpayer dollars have been spent on this. How much has it been spent on looking into, say, a electric universe theory? How much has been spent on looking into theories that don't assume that the universe is expanding? The answer is zero. Very little. Of course those theories are not developed because no money or time or energy has been spent on them. Instead, they're spent understanding all the epicycles that we currently have going on, such as quantum field theory. And people like Sean Carroll, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who have millions and millions of views, right? They're the ones actually pushing the needle. This is why you're so confused. This is why cosmology is always in crisis, is because the underlying assumptions are incorrect. The first one is you can have a dual nature to light, that light is both a wave and a particle. When you actually look down into, when they look down into particle accelerators, what are they actually finding? It's all fields. It's all fields. And they can't interact, right? Just like the epicycles of the past. They can't interact. Why? Because it's an incorrect model. What is most likely the correct model is it's all related. It's all the same. It's all a wave. It's related to electromagnetism. As Ken Wheeler said, the dielectric, right? You either have electric pressure or you have lack of it, which is going to be magnetism. That's it. And coherent magnetism, if you will, is like a laser. And that's what we see clearly as magnetism. An incoherent attraction, this incoherent system, is like gravity. That literally is gravity. And we see this in the cosmos. I'm not going to go into the electric universe theory, but what you see is look at galaxies. Galaxies are spinning. They seem to be at the dielectric, and you have these giant jets shooting out of the poles, essentially, based on most likely magnetism. Everything else is magnetic. The Earth has its own magnetic field. It's basically a giant magnet. The heliosphere of the sun is the actual magnetic relationship, right? They talk about the solar wind being a pressure coming out here and meeting the interstellar wind, right? Because everything's a particle. But what do we find from Voyager 1 and Voyager 2? The heliosphere is actually more circular than we thought, right? Again, doesn't match our models. Why is it more circular? Because it's also where the actual magnetic influence of the sun stops. It's literally looks like an atom. Essentially is an atom. If you look, the planets are in close to the dielectric, not exactly with the equator. They're 7 degrees off of the sun. But just like your galaxies, what we see is the universe is electric. What does that mean? Electromagnetic. That is light, implying that everything actually is a wave. That's why your quantum field theory for quantum mechanics works, because everything is a field. It's all a wave. And that's why you don't need gravity at the micro scales, because you're looking at the force. You're looking at it. The force of gravity at the large scales is actually just the electromagnetic force scaled up. And that's why we see crazy things like magnetars, neutron stars. Look at your galaxies. Look at our sun. Look at Jupiter. The scientist who found the aurora, right? He was ostracized. That was just recently, because that could be impossible, right? It's not possible. It's not possible if you have the incorrect assumption, a base assumption. Contradictory, by the way, that light can be something, a wave, and then at the same time can be the opposite thing, can be a particle. Of course you're going to be confused. Everything will be confused. That's why you're confused. And Einstein, I've shown his paper before, 1935. He was promoting a paper in 1935, well after general relativity, well after special relativity, proposing that Maxwell's equations be unified with GUV, basically the shape of space-time. He proposed that in 1935. So was he a huge proponent of quantum mechanics? No. Same thing as Nikola Tesla. What did Nikola Tesla always say? He thought the whole idea of particles was also ridiculous. He said the universe is electric. Everything is electric. Vibration, energy, frequency. And we even see through E equals mc squared, energy is mass. Everything is electric. There is no dual nature to light. Light is electromagnetic waves. What is matter? Matter is made up of light, which is electromagnetic waves. That's why you won't find a particle. You'll find waves. Particles are just wave energy in a certain formation. Very tight, super dense formation. Okay, so that is part one. First assumption that I'm going to challenge is this contradictory idea in the minds of all of our scientists. You can't have 7 planes of the heavens that don't interact with each other and still describe the actual physical universe. Okay, it's contradictory. You can't have both. You can't really believe that light is a wave and light is a particle. Then surely you will be confused by all these quantum spooky effects. So the next assumption I'm going to challenge is your belief that light speed is constant, that it's constant in all places for all observers. So we'll see how that is not the case through experiment. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. Consider subscribing. And a special thanks to all my patrons on patreon.com/Chris Lato. This trip to Hessdalen could not be possible without them, as well as YouTube members. Thank you so much, and please consider helping the channel. Again, couldn't be possible without your support. And in November, I'll be going on this, The Transcendence of Consciousness, Ancient Egypt Uncovered, with Nick Cook, JP Haig, Mohammed Ibrahim, and Ross Coulthart, actually. Thanks again to patrons. Could not do it without you guys. And I will give up-to-the-date, real-time information on patreon.com/Chris Lato. So again, please sign up. Thanks again. Have a great day. Peace.